Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld series in the Cold Bog with the Cult of Jingz. Last time we left off after equipping our cultists with guns for the first time, and we immediately saw those in actions both against local wildlife as well as against a tribal raiding party, and ultimately Chutney even went out on a quest all on his own and successfully destroyed a psychic suppressor machine. Now at this point we are slowly approaching summertime, but first we have some bad news from our muffalos. 4 of them have gotten sick with the flu, so Leafheart Kevin will be on duty as soon as he wakes up. Considering his medical skill and our vast supply of herbal medicine though, I don't think this is going to be a problem. In the meantime, we can watch Coco, our gardener of Jingz, bring in our very first Devilstrand harvest, and you can see she is gathering about 7 units of Devilstrand per mushroom. However, the base yield is only 5 units, at least on this difficulty, which is why we made Coco our gardener of Jingz before the harvest. As a result of that role, as well as a plant skill of 16, she now has a harvest yield of 136%, and that is turning those 5 units into 6.8 or 7 most of the time. So with a bit of luck, we should be able to acquire about 240 units of Devilstrand from this harvest, which would then be enough to craft 3 highly protective Devilstrand capes. And so, with the harvest brought in and Armando immediately going to work, it is time for the next tree torment, as Coco's work for today is done, and that means she can now get into the ritual scar. Once again, we'll do this without anybody else participating and underlined by Eric Murray's great ritual music, and while the scarring ceremony is underway, we can watch Hunter Donut improve her shooting skill to level 12 and bring in another fresh batch of meat. Back in our tree temple then, Redini goes all in and places Coco's third and for now final scar on her left eye, completely ignoring the fact that both of Coco's eyes already had scars, so this one now actually causes a slight sight impairment. It is only a 3% drop though, so I don't think it's going to affect her too much. The ritual then concludes in spectacular fashion, but sadly that is not enough to keep Chutney from suffering a mental break shortly after. Keep in mind that he is still out in the wild on his return trip from last episode's quest, and it looks like with only Muffalo Lorps to accompany him, things are not particularly entertaining out there. So he will now wander around in sadness for a while we get Jekna ready for the next tree torment. Her left big toe has already been shot off, and due to her age she also suffers from a bad back, so hopefully we can avoid acquiring any further penalties here. And it looks like we can, as Redini once again chooses the left eye. At this point this has to be more than just a coincidence, but sadly I still could not find any information about how the body parts for the scarification ceremonies are chosen. Be that as it may, the tree torment is once again spectacular and we have officially made it into growing season, and that is why we can see Coco busy at night here sowing out psychoid plants. In the last episode, we assigned the entire area around our anima tree as growing zones, in the hopes that maybe at the end of summer we can bring in a sizable harvest of psychoid leaves, which would then allow us to make some psychoid tea for everyone, a relatively harmless but still potentially quite useful little drink. In the middle of the night then, we also have an exotic goods trader arrive, and as Redini approaches the caravan on the next morning, we actually pull off a fairly sizable trade. As you can see, we are mostly buying stuff here, selling off only our components and advanced components, and thanks to the fact that we have about 3,000 silver still lying around, we can now purchase some Glitterworld medicine as well as a big pile of plasteel, as well as the side trainers for Solar Pinhole and Flash Storm, and we even grab some gold and a telescope just to slightly increase our options for recreation. All of that more or less depletes our funds, but honestly, what good is all of that money if it doesn't make us any more powerful? And I think the 2 side trainers in particular should help us out on that end. While the supplies are being hauled into safe storage, we are now also giving Jekna her third and final ritual scar, and for the 3rd time in a row, Redini now chooses the left eye, which now gives Jekna the same sight penalty that Coco earned just a few moments ago. On the bright side, Chutney comes out of his mental break and the tree torment is considered satisfying. And not only that, thanks to her remarkable social skill, Redini has also just converted a prisoner. Yes, you might remember that at the end of the last episode we took a few of those, although this one was only captured with the sole intent of converting them and then executing them. Yes, despite the fact that our last execution was just performed a few days ago, we are now starting another one. If the quality is bad, all that we will get is a small mood penalty, but there is a small chance of grabbing another development point here, which I think is more than worth that risk. Ultimately then, the ritual quality ends up being just in the middle, a satisfying execution, resulting in a nice +6 mood bonus, but nothing else. Shortly after then, Armando finishes his first Devilstrand cape, and being of good quality, it possesses an armor rating slightly higher than that of a modern flak jacket, so I think we should be able to keep the tribal or at least medieval aesthetic going for a little while longer. In the afternoon then, all of our plant workers are busy sowing out new psychoid plants while it's time for Kevin's next tree torment, and while that ceremony is underway, Chutney and Lorps finally make their triumphant return to Leviana. Leafheart Kevin then gets scarred on his leg for a change, and as you can see, the increased pain level does result in a few more stat penalties here, although we have to keep in mind that Kevin is also still battling his smoke leaf addiction, and once he's gotten over that, his stats will hopefully look a little bit better. A satisfying tree torment then to end the day, and as a reward for his services, Chutney will now be the first to wear the brand new Devilstrand cape. Eventually though, I hope that we will be able to equip everyone in these, or alternatively in high quality Ravager armors. Speaking of which, our latest recruit and dedicated animal handler Squeaks can now put on the bearskin Ravager armor that we made in the last episode. A fitting outfit, I think, considering that bears are our venerated animals. On the following morning then, we switch our food supply to pemmican for the time being, just to get rid of the agave fruit in our storage room and also because it lasts a bit longer, although for the moment we should probably rather concern ourselves with the 48-person raid that has just appeared. Just like last time, it is a breaching raid, which might make things a bit easier for us, although this time it looks like the enemies are arriving a bit more closely grouped together. However, the big difference between this time and last time is that Freya now has access to Berserk Pulse, and we can use that to cause havoc among the enemy ranks. In the meantime, our superior weaponry and the small choke point that our enemies have created for themselves all play in our favor, and so it once again looks like it's going to be a lopsided affair. Still, we are picking up some injuries on quite a few people here, and the reason for that is not actually that they're being shot at least not by our enemies. Instead, it seems like the very steep angle that our enemies are coming into range with is causing a bit of friendly fire, up to the point where we eventually send our enemies packing pretty effortlessly, but also see Jekna go down. It looks to me like Squeaks and Coco in the back have caused a few of these injuries, so perhaps for future encounters we should work a bit on our defensive lineup. For now, we can send everyone back into the village and also patch up a few of the survivors. Once again, I would like our people to take a few prisoners here. We have also acquired some jade from this fight, which is why we are now deconstructing some of the marble slab bats, all the while Kevin is giving his medical skill of 13 a bit of practice by patching up everyone who's injured. And yes, that does include some enemies, so you can see our prison barracks are filling up, although far from everyone in here is meant to join us. Also, in the middle of the night, one of our captives suffers from an infection, so now we'll get to see how strong their will to survive actually is. Spending the night in our small makeshift hospital, Maniac also suffers a mental break, and he has now decided to go on a psychite binge. And this is one of those mental breaks that we want to interrupt immediately, otherwise we would risk him becoming addicted, and you can see what that is currently doing to Kevin, who is pretty much constantly in a not so great mood and also has a few nasty stat penalties to go along with it. So a quick imprisonment and release solves the issue, but does not get rid of the bad mood, although a few more hours of sleep in his own bedroom should hopefully take care of that. On the following morning then, Armando has finished his very first Plasteel Guardian helmet. Yes, that is what we bought that Plasteel from the trader for. And while Armando is now immediately starting to make the next one, this piece of headgear with the armor rating of a flak helmet is now going on Chutney as well. Admittedly, his entire look has now changed a bit, from tribal to a bit more medieval, but then again, after 26 episodes, I think it is fair for the Cult of Jingz to evolve at least a little bit. One of our prisoners then suffers a crisis of belief and converts to the Cult of Jingz immediately. For the sake of her own survival, I would say that that was the right choice. In his new fancy outfit, meanwhile, Chutney goes buffalo hunting, while we can see Jekna at the tailoring bench, first receiving a shooting inspiration, and then shortly after finishing a bear headdress, of course made from bearskin. This piece of headgear from the Vanilla Faction's expanded Vikings mod is not necessarily meant to be overly protective, instead it is mainly meant to complete Squiggs' new outfit. As our animal handler, I think she deserves to have a bit more of a unique look, and I think this right here certainly gets the job done. Shortly after midnight then, we have a new name to give out as Grit the Yak has given birth, and so, as always, chosen from the list of patron supporters in the naming rights tier and above, Yak number 4 will now go by the name of Spoons after the patron supporter of the same name. And while we're at it, we also have a new Gowmaker Dryad to name. This one will now go by Ambroso, and then it's time for something unfortunate, at least if you are one of our prisoners. The infection on this lady's right arm here has unfortunately progressed to extreme levels, and so before the infection takes her, Redini will now put her out of her misery. Again, she was not meant to join us anyway, and we are even rewarded for it with a taming inspiration on Thoraya, although with an animal handling skill of only 5, there are not that many options to use this on. And so, on the next morning, it is a new dawn in Liviana, as Armando can be seen quickly putting together 3 blue fur bedrolls. Once those are done, it is time to launch another caravan, as we still have this ancient complex over here waiting to be explored. And because it is still time for Squiggs to actually prove herself and earn those ritual scars, she will now accompany our combat specialists Donut and Chutney on this one. As our animal handler, she will of course not do so by herself, but also take Muffalo's Cindy and Lorps, as well as Grizzly Bear's Dr. Thunder and Jacer, the first 2 meant to carry back some of the loot we hopefully acquire, while the latter might end up having to fight for us. And while the caravan is packing their things, we then receive a very interesting message, as it looks like we have new lovers in Liviana, although with a bit of a twist. Took the Cook and our guest Raven have fallen in love, and this now presents us with an interesting dilemma. So while Armando is now receiving another ritual scar, let's quickly discuss this, because according to her quest, Raven is actually set to leave Liviana again in just a few days. Of course, she could do that and still remain Took's lover, but that would also rob the 2 of them of some pretty powerful mood bonuses that lovers get if they are allowed to spend time together. On the other hand, we cannot simply recruit her, as she belongs to another faction, and so the only way to get her to join us is to imprison her, which would of course anger that faction. So please let me know what you would like us to do in this case, while we also see that a war merchant arrives just as our caravan leaves the map, and as Armando receives only his 2nd scarification scar on his torso. After a satisfying tree torment, Redini can then catch up with the trader, and once again we are making some moves here, selling off some medicine, some old weapons, a few blue fur capes and even a good quality suit of plate armor, all to afford one of the animals this trader is selling, and no, I am not talking about the grizzlies. Another one would be nice, no doubt about it, but instead we are going to acquire the rhinoceros. And the fact that we are not giving it a name right away is probably a good indicator of what's going to happen to it, as rhinoceros leather is one of the most protective materials in the game, only topped by Thrumbo fur, Devilstrand and Hyperweave. And so, just before bedtime, Thoraya puts a quick end to our latest acquisition, while her husband Maniac stays up just a little while longer to hunt a polar bear. On the next morning then, we receive the long-awaited first quest in the hunt for Red Hawk, the mysterious artifact that we added in the last ideology reform. This time, the first bit of information can be found on an ancient terminal, with the small caveat that this terminal is located in a tribal village, and that its inhabitants will not be happy if we touch it. I think we should be able to solve this with a few psycasts though, but let's not stretch our ranks too thin and wait until our caravan returns first. With Grizzly Vladimir giving birth, we then do in fact get that next bear in our ranks as well, who will now go by the name of Matrix after patron Matrix 7. To clear some space in our storage room and to make her even more powerful, Freya can then also learn the 2 psycasts we acquired earlier. First, Flash Storm, a situational but potentially powerful level 5 psycast, and then Solar Pinhole, just so that Specs does not have to do all the lighting work herself. Speaking of Specs, our colony leader is currently busy extracting trees, because for the eventual raid that is not a breacher, we need a clear line of fire down the river. In the evening, Redini then visits one of our prisoners again, but this time not with the intent to recruit or convert, but to enslave. Slavery has actually been tolerated in the Cult of Jingz since day one, although we never actually used it. This here will therefore be our first candidate, and it shouldn't take long as we only need to break their will and not their considerably higher resistance. Just as Thoraya finishes the construction of 2 more marble braziers inside of our tree temple, we are informed that the anima tree is ready to give out its next psycaster rank, and as you can see, after maxing out Freya in the last episode, we still have plenty of options. However, with the entire event taking 6 hours, we will take care of that tomorrow and instead watch Jekna, who has now started working on a terror sculpture. Her artistic skill of 15 will hopefully yield a good result, which in this case means a terrifying one, as terror sculptures are used to suppress slaves. I think we'll talk a bit more about slave mechanics in the next episode, which will actually take place in summer, as we are now officially informed that summertime has begun. Our prisoner's will is then also quickly broken, although to make them our slave it will take 1 more attempt. In that sense, the mechanics here are very similar to first removing someone's resistance and then recruiting them. On the following morning then, we have amazing news in the arrival of a small herd of Thrumbo. 4 animals have made it into the Cold Bog, and believe me when I say they will not make it out. Not only would this be a much-needed influx of high-quality crafting materials, now that Armando has finished another Devilstrand cape, but the meat we would get from these 4 animals would also ensure that we won't have to go hunting for quite some time. And so, as we send Kevin out to begin the linking ceremony with the anima tree and obtain his first psycaster rank, a small hunting party led by colony leader Specs herself intercepts the Thrumbos. Arguably though, it is Freya who decides to fight in our favor with a well-placed berserk pulse, which causes 2 Thrumbos to flee and the other 2 to occupy themselves with each other, allowing us to simply shoot them down with little resistance. The other 2 will suffer the same fate shortly, but first let's jump over to Chutney, Donut and Squigs, who have arrived at the mission site. The ancient ruin lies in front of them, so far nothing out of the ordinary, so let's crack it open and see what's inside. The first room does not hold anything of interest for us, the next 2 however do, in the form of 2 hermetic crates and an ancient comms console. Before we interact with anything though, let's keep exploring further, which unfortunately quickly uncovers a hidden infestation inside of the facility. So back out we go, getting ready for a fight and picking up some advanced components, luciferium and packaged survival meals along the way, until the insects then arrive and immediately come rushing at us. It is a very good thing, however, that Squigs brought some of her bears, as those are now keeping the mega spiders occupied while our colonists remain safe. And while the fight against some of these smaller insects is still going on, Kevin gains his first psychic power. He has now been blessed with the ability Chunk Skip, a psycast that allows him to teleport over 5 rock chunks, which can of course be used very creatively, but are mostly used to create cover. Meanwhile, back at the ancient complex, the last insect has just been defeated and the area is now declared safe, even though both Dr. Thunder and Jace suffered quite a few injuries in the process. At this point, we can then explore further, which reveals 2 more hermetic crates as well as an ancient enemy terminal, and shortly after a 3rd crate as well as an unstable fuel node. And that fuel node is most likely going to explode soon, so let's pick up all available goodies first, which in this case means more silver and more luciferium. Chutney then also uses the ancient comms console to hack a supply satellite, sending down cargo pods containing roughly 200 units of pork, and because we are not here to fight any more than we have to, we will leave the ancient enemy terminal alone and can now reform our caravan and send them back home. I have to admit, in terms of loot, I had hoped for something different and not just luciferium that we are likely never going to use, but it will fetch a good price on the trade market and so will the advanced components. The same is true, by the way, for Thrumbo horns, and as you can see, we are in the process of acquiring 2 more here, and once again, thanks to various psycasts, the entire affair is not too challenging. Our meat supply is also already looking great, so Took the Cook will have his work cut out for him for the next few days, and just in that moment we also receive word that yes, we have now in fact enslaved our first prisoner. And even though she is of course not going to be a full member of Liviana by any means, she will still receive a new name, Robola this time, after the patron supporter of the same name. Now, Robola was picked as a slave for what I hope are obvious reasons. Not only is she a talented crafter, but she also has the industrious and neurotic traits, giving her a work speed bonus of plus 55%. So I think we won't have any issues finding work for her, be that cutting stone chunks or something more complicated, and thanks to the fact that slaves also have separate slave expectations, her mood should hopefully not be a problem either. So while he is still out on his caravan, let's make Chutney's small hut our temporary slave quarters. Obviously, we will have to find something more permanent in the next episode. That also goes for Robola's outfit, which for now is limited to only tribal wear, but we do have a few additional options available to make her look properly slave-like. All of that and more will take place in the next episode though. For today, with everyone heading off to bed, I think we have found a good place to make the cut. No fan art this week, but I think after last episode's huge compilation, I think we can live with that. And of course, we will always have our outro music, which, just like the ritual music, you can find linked down below in the description. And if you have a creation of your own, the best way to send me artwork of any kind is via email to pete@petecomplete.com. I am very excited to see what we'll have for the next one. For today then, let's make the cut right here. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can subscribe if you haven't done so already, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.